Welcome back to TV Toastmasters. I'm Beth Genly, your host for this segment, and this evening I have the honor of interviewing Dr. Scott Abrahamson, who's a chiropractor. He works in Lake Oswego, Oregon, and specializes in spinal care and migraine headaches. He's been in practice for 30 years, having traveled to Melbourne, Australia to present a sports medicine seminar, served on the Oregon Board of Chiropractic in various capacities, and prior to his chiropractic career, he trained as a chemical dependency and alcoholism counselor in his native Minnesota. In addition to his clinical practice, he teaches online classes for physicians and support staff. He's currently producing a course for the state of Oregon on cultural competency for healthcare professionals. And this evening, his topic is headaches, great and small. Dr. Scott Abrahamson, welcome to our program.
Thank you for having me.
And how shall I call you?
Scott is fine.
Scott is fine. All right. Well, you have a pretty interesting background. How did you end up in Australia?
Oregon, the college that I attended, had a strong sports medicine program, chiropractic, and so they had a new college in Phillips Institute in Melbourne. So I just had the audacity to write to them and say, I'll come and teach you about making orthotics. And they said, come on down. And so they didn't pay my whole way, but they gave me a stipend. It was really fun.
That sounds like an awesome trip. And now you're very interested in headaches as a chiropractor. How did that come about?
My father had headaches, some pretty severe headaches. He had a stroke at 41, so that probably was related, looking back on it. But I've always been intrigued by headaches, and I actually joined the National Headache Foundation in the 90s as a chiropractor. They wouldn't let chiropractors join as physicians, so I joined as a public member, and I've always gotten their newsletters and stayed in touch, and also, of course, for treating my patients with the various kinds of headaches that they have presented with.
So what kind of headaches are there, and how do you treat them differently?
They come in all sorts and flavors. The most common are migraines and tension headaches, and there's sinus headaches, there's hysterical headaches, there's dental-related headaches. It just goes on and on. But the two big players in the headache field are migraines and muscle tension.
Migraines and muscle tension, that sounds like the opposite ends of the spectrum, like their treatments would be really different, and their causes too.
Well, it seems like I can predictably treat a muscle tension headache. Most of them come from the muscles at the base of the spine, and people usually feel it with a grinding pain up in their forehead, but it doesn't tend to throb. It just sits there and grinds. But the pain is actually sourced from the muscles at the base of their skull. So the chiropractic approach is to try to get those joints moving, to relax the muscles, teach them some home care, get a better pillow, sit better at their computer, and a lot of times their headaches will abate. So muscle tension has a very good outcome.
I had a very good outcome. I am a huge fan of chiropractic because I used to have headaches constantly. And someone finally said, go see a chiropractor. And at that point I said, a what? Because I hadn't heard of them before. But I went to see a chiropractor, got my headaches taken care of, and now I just go back for tune-ups now and again. It's been just a lifesaver for me. But I don't have migraines. I understand those are pretty different.
Migraines are a terrifying condition. In fact, if you care about or love someone or work with someone who has migraines, you should not take my word for it. In fact, it's not enough to listen to one person. Read a book. And the two books that I recommend are Migraine by Dr. Oliver Sacks, who's a neurologist from Harvard, and A Brain Wider Than the Sky by Andrew Levy. And I swear, by the time you're halfway through the book, you want to go buy flowers for the migraine sufferer. It is so broad spectrum, so life-encompassing, and so miserable. Another aspects are kind of like abused people. They not only deal with the pain of a migraine, but they constantly deal with the life changes and the fear of the next migraine. And you ask anyone who gets regular migraines, it's the constant concern that I'm going to have another one. and I don't know how to plan my life. I can't plan my life because I might get a headache.
That sounds really miserable. So what are kind of standard treatments for migraines, and how well do they work?
Well, the standard is always medication. And it's interesting because the early first, a migraine is a blood vessel related headache. The blood vessels expand and you get a headache. It's much more complicated than that. In fact, the triggers that people talk about, if I drink red wine, I get a migraine, so on. That has to do with triggering this expansion of blood vessels. And blood vessels are controlled by nerves. So it's actually a nerve blood vessel issue. And so people struggle with the migraine prodrome, or the beginning of the headache.
The aura, they call it, too.
Right, the aura. They might be nauseated, see tunnel vision, and so on. So for years and years, the drugs that they used to treat them were trying to constrict the blood vessels. And so they developed this drug from ergot, which is a mold that grows on rye. And it was called ergotamine. And it had some side effects. It left a terrible taste in your mouth. It made people sick to their stomach, but it worked with some people. And then for several years, the neurologist decided it's not blood vessels at all. It's kind of a rolling blackout in a power outage. And they think that it goes across the brain as depolarization of the nerves. It stimulates the next nerve, and that was popular for 12 or 15 years, and now they're back to blood vessels. And so
they're still struggling to figure it out in this day and age.
It's not known. And so you'll see these carefully worded terms in medical literature that say the exact mechanism is not known, but we know everything you need to know about it. And it's like, well, you don't really. So the triptans became popular, and that's where you'll hear the term Imitrex, which is a part of a group of medications. I'm not licensed or trained to prescribe medication, but I've read plenty about it. And triptans are also vasoconstrictors. They constrict the blood vessels around the brain. The challenge being that if you are at risk for heart disease or stroke and you're constricting the blood vessels, you may set off an urgent situation. And in reading further, they mentioned that there are people with silent heart disease. They've never had a symptom. It won't show up in an EKG, but they may find that they had heart disease when they have a heart attack. That's their first symptom. So that's the standard drug, is triptans, like Imitrex. And it used to be you could only inject it into your thigh. You probably know about that. It was only injectable. And then 10 years later, it became pill form and nasal spray. And the problem is, for some people, it doesn't touch their migraines. By the way, painkillers don't seem to do any good. Narcotics don't touch migraines.
We have about 3 minutes left, so I'd love it if you could talk a little bit about nutritional approaches and any other approaches that you think might be on the horizon that are helpful.
My, how the time flies. The nutritional approaches are your own investigator. Look for the things that trigger you and keep track. Keep a migraine diary. It's online all over the place. I would say the most helpful thing for the future is, there's every app on the phone that you can dream up, and they're coming up with apps for biofeedback, which is, at first it was not considered that big of a deal. Now it's coming back into favor. And with cell phone apps, you can actually pin a little sensor to your earlobe or your finger, and your heart rate and pressure will register on the phone, and you can actually change how your inner state is by biofeedback. So that, I think, is the most helpful for people who don't respond well to migraine medication. And some people respond well to chiropractic adjustments. It's all over the board.
I was going to ask you about body work for people with migraines.
Acupuncture, massage, chiropractic care, different people respond differently. My sister-in-law had good luck with eliminating a certain color of dye from her diet. She swears that's it. So the point is, be your own advocate. Keep looking, because even the best neurologists aren't in touch with some of the more alternative, esoteric things that may work.
So it almost sounds like it's more like a cluster of diagnoses, a cluster of possible causes, and people need to figure out which ones apply in their
Right.
situation.
Right. I mean, one of the things that I found with my daughter-in-law, she gets anxious as she gets ready to travel, and they travel a lot. And she'll get a migraine on the trip. Well, it turns out that she gets so anxious, like busy, that when she finally arrives at her destination, the release of stress is what causes the migraines. So I encourage her to do all the planning and packing and everything a week before she leaves, and then have her last week be less pressure filled, and she thinks it may have interrupted her pattern.
That's beautiful. So where can more information be found about migraines and how you work with them?
Well, I'll cite myself in a moment, but the World Health Organization is an enormous website and approach to it.
We have 20 seconds. So.
Okay, and I have more information can be found on Hope for Headaches. It's spelled out F-O-R, hopeforheadaches.com.
hopeforheadaches.com. Thank you, Dr. Abrahamson. We're very grateful you're here tonight. I'm Beth Genly. Thank you for watching TV Toastmasters.
Hi, and welcome back to our program. I'm Laura Handke, Lake Oswego's transformational voice teacher, member of TV Toasted. And for any of those who may have seen a segment or two of mine before on this program, or possibly have come to one of my presentations at the Toastmaster Leadership Institute, what you may know about me is that I am extremely passionate about helping people bring out their inner authentic voice into the outer world. Well, for a lot of us, and that's Toastmasters or people who aren't even in Toastmasters, it can be a little bit scary when it comes to using your voice to talk about yourself or your business. And that's why I have asked an expert in this area to come join me today. Her name is Stephanie Arnheim, and she's an expert at helping people connect and network. Thank you so much for joining us today, Stephanie. I am thrilled to have you here.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, let's start really with your background. I mean, your business is about connecting. It's about helping people network. So how was it? This is kind of an unusual business. Not everyone has a business like that, right?
That is true.
So tell me how you got started on this path, what makes you passionate about it, and how you got to where you are today.
Well, I started with networking. As long as I can remember, I've been connecting people, which is networking and building those relationships. But in 2014, I decided to take it to the next level and formed my business, Stephanie Connects. Now, I've always been an introvert. So one of the reasons why I started it was being an introvert, I knew I needed to get out there to promote my business. And so I wasn't sure how to do it. So I started looking at how thought leaders, how other people were doing it, worked on strategies, took some courses, read up on, body language and other type of things to create my business, to create my own strategies that work for an introvert, how to overcome being a nervous networker. So that's how that all started. And it's been a very exciting process because it is about connections and how you can take the different degrees of connection to build it into a business.
Now, and this is something I find so interesting because you use the word connection a lot.
Yes.
And people don't think about the word connection when it comes to networking. You think about walking into this room full of people you don't know and handing out business cards or whatever the case may be, which makes people scared and nervous, right? But the first time I really started to understand those degrees of connection, and there's a theory out there that it's the 6 degrees of connection, right? Like the 6 degrees to Kevin Bacon movie trivia game.
Yes.
Well, the first time I really got that was when I was in my first mastermind group. and I didn't even know what a mastermind group was at that time. I was just invited to a group of women that said, you know, we want to help each other make our dreams come true. Do you want to come to our first meeting? And I'm like, can I be there yesterday? Yes, I want to come help a bunch of women help each other make our dreams come true, right?
Yes.
But it's all about those 6 degrees and about how one person knows someone who knows someone else. And that became the title of my first book, 6 Degrees to Your Dreams, right? So let's talk a little bit more about that connection piece and what you learned maybe when you first started going to those networking meetings yourself.
When I first started going to those networking meetings, I was in this panic mode a lot of times. So I thought there has to be the strategies, and as I mentioned, I did a lot of research on it. And one of the things I always tell people, and this is something that I learned, is to have a goal when you go to a networking event. So I was thinking, who do I want to meet for my business? I was in a different business my first time I was out networking before I started my own Stephanie Connects. And I was like, okay, who am I looking to meet? What type of person? And that takes a lot of the stress out when you think of it from a strategic standpoint. Now, I always want to have the fun part too. So you mentioned the 6 degrees.
Right.
Well, one of the things about Portland, Oregon is there's not 6 degrees. There's like 2 degrees or 1 degree of separation.
Right.
So I was always running into people I knew, and I found that also helped ease the stress. So I'd always go look first for the people I knew, and then tell them who I was looking for, and that's how I would start in my networking experience.
So speaking of goals and connection, then I do have to ask a question, which is, have you ever been a Toastmaster? Have you been in Toastmasters before yourself?
Oh, yes. I was in the Timber Talkers. I'm a proud former Timber Talkers. I was in for 4 years.
Awesome.
Evaluator and strict counter.
Oh,
you know?
Which never goes away, does it?
No. Whenever I'm talking, I'm counting myself.
I think
terrible thing.
This is a part of becoming once a Toastmaster and an uncounter, always an counter.
Absolutely.
We catch these things. But see, this is another thing that I personally have found about Toastmasters myself is that, well, I'll give you just one example. I started going because I wanted to improve my public speaking and my leadership skills, of course. But at that time, when I joined my first club, which was We Toasted in Lake Oswego, Oregon, I was offering an acting class. And guess what? 5 of the 6 people who signed up for that first class were from Toastmasters.
There you go.
So you just never know what is going to happen for you as a result of joining one of these clubs and how it is going to help you in your connections, you know, and also with public speaking and about learning how to be more comfortable talking about yourself and or your business out in the world, right? So with that, let's go. You talked about setting a goal. Well, that's a really good point, and I should probably elaborate a little bit before we move on to the next piece, is that by those degrees and by that goal of meeting someone, we don't necessarily mean I want to meet this particular person. It could be that I want to meet a particular person in this particular role.
Correct.
Like maybe I need to find an architect.
Yes.
Or, you know, my next step in my business plan is I need to find a web designer or
Right.
whatever the case may be. And when you start talking to people, mentioning, you know, one next step for me might be that I need to find a good web designer. Well, that person may not know one, but they say, oh, my sister just hired one for her pet sitting business and she's thrilled or whatever. So those are your 2 degrees.
Yes.
You meet the person who has, well, that's 3 actually. You meet the person who just hired the web designer who knows the web designer. So 3 degrees. But sometimes it can be a specific person, and it can happen that way as well, which is exciting.
When that happens, it's even better. I never want people to feel that we all can help the world.
Right.
But I never want people to feel that they are asking too specific. There's never too specific. Like if someone wanted to meet the head of the HR department at ABC company, it's okay to ask them to do you know, especially in Portland, like with the high-tech world, we have Nike, we have all these other places.
Right.
People know each other. It's okay to ask.
Yes.
The more specific you're asked in your messaging, the better off you'll be. So you want to get your messaging very, very key so that people always want to come back and say, tell me more.
Which leads into that question I wanted to give us more tips. You know, for these people, and many of us have been in that situation. In fact, more people are than not, probably. You walk into a meeting where you're supposed to be networking, which we're learning is really connecting and developing relationships. What are some tips for those nervous networkers?
Networkers.
Yeah.
Well, one of them is we had spoken about the power pose. You use it in when
I didn't bring that up
vocal
today,
coaching.
but yes.
Yes. But the other thing has to do with, I'll go back to the messaging. We usually, whenever we go to a networking event, you have 10 seconds or 30 seconds to tell people about what you do. So what I encourage people to do is look at a niche that you're looking for. Look at maybe using a functional title instead of a regular title.
And by that?
You know, if you're president of a company, that means nothing. But if you're head of global operations for the Pacific Northwest in like apparel or something, you're going to be able to, for instance, for myself, I'm Portland's networking expert is my functional title. On my business card, it says business networking strategist.
Okay.
So there's a difference. The whole goal is for people to ask you, tell me more, or how do you do that? That's the whole purpose of a functional title, or for in your messaging, start with a question. That's a great tip whenever you're given the mic, say at a chamber event. It's like, don't say your name first. Start with a question that evokes a response.
Nice.
I'm
liking that idea a lot. And in a minute, I'm going to ask you to give an example. We're going to play around with this just a little bit. But before I do that, I want to, you had mentioned the power pose. So let's tell people what that is a little bit. A lot of Toastmasters know, but some may not. And first step, of course, is to breathe. I'm a vocal teacher, so I have to tell you, when you're up in front of a group and you're talking about yourself, you're introducing yourself, remember to take deep belly breaths and speak, be conscious of your exhaling and speaking with that breath. But the power pose is like Wonder Woman.
Yes.
You put your hands on your hips right here before you walk into that room. Or in the bathroom, or
in the parking lot.
In the parking lot or something, because that pose right there is going to make you feel a little bit more powerful. So on a very short amount of time that we have left, let's pick someone who's a common person at a networking event, say an insurance professional, a real estate, something like that. How can they use these tips to kind of make their niche and their functional role just a little bit more clear?
Okay, let's use a realtor, because there's lots of realtors around here.
Okay.
Now, realtors, the same thing. They could help everyone. Anybody who wants to buy a house, But say you're looking at the senior market, or say who do you know has an aging parent who has to move out?
Right.
I'm looking to help those seniors who are looking to move to assisted living.
Well, there you go.
That's a very specific niche.
Yeah.
It's not to say if, you came to that realtor and said, hey, could you help me sell my house?
Well, of course they can.
But when you present a niche, people are going to automatically think about that in their head, and they'll be able to drill down. Then they say, hi, I'm Stephanie Arnheim with ABC Realty. So if you start with the question, that's what people are going to hear first. They're going to hear it first, your first 10 seconds of what you say.
Right.
Then you can do your other stuff.
And not only that, then they're going to remember you.
Yes, and always end with your name and your company at the end.
Excellent. Well, those are helpful tips, I think, Stephanie, and I hope that, and I believe it will be helpful for our audience as well. So if anybody has any more questions about the work that you do, where can you be found?
On my website, stephanieconnects.com.
All right, stephanieconnects.com. So that's perfect, easy to remember. And I just really want to, again, thank Stephanie for being here today. She's a delightful person. I love her. I'm so happy she was on the show with me today. So again, her website is stephanieconnects.com. I'm Laura Handke, Lake Oswego's transformational voice teacher. Thanks for joining us today. I look forward to seeing you next time.